Khalil and I sort of first imagined this idea of the woke cipher in conversation. We probably spent the last year sort of having conversations around, critically responsive education in a number of ways. And we were talking about music, and we were probably listening to music on the radio in her car, and this idea sort of began to percolate. And so the idea of the woke cipher really grew out of that conversation, and really thinking about what does that really mean. And as time went on and we really sort of let the idea marinate, sort of a framework came to be. So hence all of the elements that make up the woke cipher, right?
So for me, being a child of the 90s, music and hip hop was at the center of my life. When I think back to my K through 12 education, various songs can take me to specific grades and specific experiences. As a Caribbean American woman, that idea that music stems through my whole entire life. It can be something as simple as, I don't remember the first time that I heard a Bob Marley song. Like, Bob Marley just existed in my life. I don't remember the first time I heard hip hop. It just existed in my life. I can remember the first time that a song really spoke to me, or lyrics really spoke to me. The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Now, I was almost an adult because I was in college, but I remember that album spoke to me as a young black woman in New York, just living, working, loving. That album, Jill Scott's album, just centered my whole identity. I would often say, how did Jill or Lauren read my journals so that they could create these songs? So when we started to think about, well, what does it mean to create curriculum that centers our new century urban students, and even urban, I hate that, our new century Black and Latino students, we knew that hip hop and music, that spiritual connection would be important in thinking about how we craft curriculum.
It can be considered a hip hop term, but it's also, indigenous. A cipher represents a circle. A cipher represents innovation and being able to bring whatever you bring to the table on an individual basis. The importance of it being, at least from a visual perspective, being seen as a circle is that that represents everybody being equally invested, everybody being equally accountable to their portion that they have to present and accounted for. In my teaching, I try to start every class with a circle so that everybody feels equally invested at the initial phase, and they know that whatever they have to contribute, whether it be improvisational, whether it be something planned, whether it be something that they've thought about with an in-depth, profound sense of knowledge or self, that it's equally valued and that it doesn't feel less than or greater than someone else's contribution.
I decided to teach my students about Henrietta Lacks, and so I just put up a picture of Henrietta Lacks before we read anything about her, and just had the students come up with their own questions about who she was, and I gave like little tidbits about her life, and from there they just either put up words or questions on her actual picture before we even got into the text. And I started to see like they had this critical analysis that they were applying. Who was she? Why were her cells stolen? Who stole them? What does that mean for her contributions to medicine and science? And that wouldn't have happened without the woke cipher. Like that, it created an awakening within me, which then I started putting into my lessons, which I'm seeing now the kids are,
I find that students will just come to me with a song, a music, and like, oh miss, this is the one you should use next. Without me asking them, they'll bring one to me for me to use in class.
One of the elements has to do with, things being fashionable, and that there is artistry and creativity in that, right? So the element of artistry is really about all of the different ways that we are expressive, creative, and fashioning ourselves in different ways. And in my 15 years of teaching, if there's anything that you learn about, when you're around your students, is when you observe them and you see the things that they're really into, when you see the things that they're that young people are always giving you hints about who they are. So whether it's the way they dress, whether it's the way they do their hair, the color book bag or type of book bag they carry, the students are always sharing some aspect of themselves in an artistic way.
A lot of what I've learned in the sessions is like the new students. These students, they're different than even myself, who consider themselves really young, because of technology and because of the access of information. And so it's not just as much of me giving them information, even in social studies, but teaching them how to facilitate and gain knowledge from the information that they're learning in the classroom, but also the information that they're getting from their cell phones, from their peers, and from their everyday life.
So I try to utilize what from their culture is important. What do they understand? What skills do they come with from their culture? And I incorporate it in my teaching and my practices. And when we go out and do like internships, or I create different internships for the students, it's based on what they're able to do culturally.
What does the hood know? Or barbershop and beauty salon talking with one another, and what does that relaxed environment feel like? What is the difference?
Your neighborhoods, your grandmothers, your grandfathers, your family members, the people that you encounter every day have a wealth of knowledge embedded in their experiences already that you can tap into, that can inform you from a social and emotional perspective and inform you from an academic perspective. And so in looking at this from a lesson planning perspective, to make sure that you allow students the opportunity to activate the wealth of information that's already accessible to them in terms of what the hood knows. So utilizing that to plan your lessons from that perspective, and then making sure that if there's a way that you can attach activities or outcomes to the wealth of knowledge that the hood presents, or that students can go and be investigators of, that could be very, very beneficial to your work products and your lesson planning, curriculum planning.
Another aspect of the cipher that I think is really powerful and important is this idea of movement. And so when we first started talking about this idea of movement, it was just like thinking about, well, there's movement, like go from point A to point B, but also the word movement, the multiple meanings of movement in terms of when you're engaged in collective action, right? Black Lives Matter, civil rights movement, and so forth. And of course, the sort of foundational definition that we're all familiar with, this idea of moving our bodies. And I think as people of the African diaspora, that's so important, because for so long, historically, we were told what to do with our bodies. Our bodies were managed, our bodies were commodified, our bodies were handled and abused. And so allowing students to be in their bodies, to use their bodies in the classroom, can be an act of liberation.
So when we were thinking about how do we craft a decolonized curriculum that centers New Century students, their ideology, their sensibilities, their curiosity, we decided to go back to elements of hip hop. So art of the spoken word and storytelling, that's the intersection of hip hop. How do we use our language and our words to allow us to tell a story that isn't through the lens of those who colonized us, but rather through our own lens and our own
The
experiences?
greatest takeaway I've taken from these sessions are just by tweaking my lesson a little bit to make it more culturally relevant, it really increases the level of student engagement, which ultimately allows me to increase the level of rigor.
One takeaway for me is that I want to do more work that surrounds a lot of entrepreneurial skills. So on top of like letting students have their authentic voice shine through the classroom, I think I've been thinking a lot about what is it about my students and how they live in this new world, in this new century, and how am I going to be incorporating that a little bit more.
One of the most important elements to me was street entrepreneurism, or as we call it, CREAM. Cash rules everything around me, CREAM. How can we engage students in new century entrepreneurism that is about making money and solving our own problems? We don't need anyone to come into the hood and help us figure out how to help ourselves. What we need to do as educators is help students find ways to access how they'll help themselves. So for us, CREAM, making sure that every single thing that we teach has that aspect of entrepreneurism in it. That kids know that I am developing a skill that will help me to build my own ability to make my own money, work with my own community, provide jobs and provide solutions. We thought that was really, really important in every single unit that a teacher decides to teach.
I think more about what the skills that students are going to need to survive in the coming years or whatever. Like in regards to like what does it take to be like a freelancer? What does it take to manage a business or to work in a business or work with others? And how can I get those skills that they're going to need into my curriculum?
It's influenced it because I seek things out more. I've always been like an avid reader. So that's really like not necessarily a growth point for me, but I think the things that I read and how much more I take on is a lot different. Like my goal right now is like a book a month. Barely hitting it, but I'm trying.
Yeah.
And so really just understanding that I need to get used to feeding myself with that knowledge so I can better inform my practice.
Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. When you start to really investigate how artists use language and words, that is the snapshot of history that lives on forever. You throw a beat on it, and then that melody, those words, just stays in your mind. When you put those lyrics down and you do a deep dive and you look at it contextually, time and space, you know, I got loyalty and royalty inside my DNA. I might have messed that up. But when you use those lyrics as an authority and you put them up with Shakespeare and Dunbar and Langston Hughes and Toni Morrison, and you give students access to saying this is just as important as this because it tells a story that doesn't get told, and you center that in an academic institution, you allow our students to recognize their power. So for me, music is text, CREAM, Sankofa, what does the hood know? Take it to the streets. Really, I can't even figure out which one is the one that is in my heart. That's why we have so many. So these elements are about decolonizing our practice and decolonizing our curriculum so that, very specifically for us, culturally responsive educators of the African diaspora, we let our students know that the knowledge that they possess, that they have, is the knowledge that they need to create the future that we're all excited to go into.
Now I be African, I rap and sing, capable of everything, pedagogy, culturally responsive, so full of melanin. I stay on that swag, that hot sauce in my back, mix it with some maquillage sauce and going viral like a hashtag. Hey.